Boy, I appreciate Bert Huff and my staff. We use y'all to staff our credit union. Pruitt Ford is our second best funder of contracts and deals and what have you. And the Better Business Bureau keeps me out of trouble. You'll probably be getting complaints shortly. And I'm going to tell you about the complaint right now because it fits in with what we're doing. But when you think of the Better Business Bureau, what comes to your mind? Is it the place you go when somebody's ripping you off and you want to make sure that you're not going to get ripped off? Yeah, that's what people oftentimes think of. And I love looking in the room over here. There's a judge and there's a lady, and the lady says, but I didn't read the contract. And the judge says, but you got to pay anyway. I loved in the bathroom. It had 2 or 3 fraud pictures there. And you used to be able to identify a fraudster very easy because he came in with his wagon and his snake oils and all those kinds of potions, and that's how he committed his fraud. But right now, the fraud are people just like us. You cannot identify the fraudster just by what they look like or whatever. In fact, I saw that you took out your credit card and you're looking at that EMV chip, okay? That's European MasterCard Visa chip. It's a little piece of metal they put in the cards in order to dramatically reduce the amount of fraud that happens. And when that comes into play, October the 15th, or October of 2015, we will reduce a lot of the fraud, but we're not going to eliminate the fraud. The fraud that I'm going to be talking about today will not be eliminated because of the EMV chip. The EMV chip is good. We're only multiple years behind, many years behind Europe, who implemented that chip. And now it has come to the United States. It's been here for about 2 years, but as of October 5th of 2015, this October, there's a big change as to how that's going to play out. But I want to share with you some stories that EMV is not going to prevent. I want to share with you some stories of how fraud happens, and you're going, you've got to be kidding me. And the first one I'm going to share is one that is less than a week old, where an individual is complaining to us, the credit union, saying there was fraud that was committed with my credit card. And so we go through the natural process of tell us your name and where you've used your card and what's the fraud that's happened, and do you have any idea who might have committed the fraud? And yeah, I do. I says, well, who is it? I said, I do. My staff member does. Ask that question. He says, well, yeah, it's an acquaintance of mine. I says, an acquaintance? Can you tell me more about the acquaintance? Well, she's a friend of mine. Can you tell me more about the friend of mine who's an acquaintance? Well, I gave her the card, and she just spent more on the card than she was supposed to have spent. Says, can you tell me more about this friend who you gave the card to, who spent more than she was supposed to spend, and she gave the card back to you? And it turns out to be, it was his lover, and that was her payment for it. But now he thinks that he should get to force me to pay him back for the fraud that happened on his card. And when the Better Business Bureau gets that complaint in a few days, I'll have to respond to it going, okay, here's the rest of the story that he didn't tell you, okay? That's called friend fraud. And friend fraud actually tends to be a very large part of fraud. Before I go to my next story, take a look at the questions on your handout. And I have a gift card here for the person who can tell me what is the first occasion of identity theft. When did the first occasion of identity theft arrive? It's good for a steak dinner at your favorite steakhouse because it's a
1985.
1985, great guess.
82.
82, that's a greater guess.
74.
74 is not any better.
89.
Oh guys, you're in the wrong century. It didn't even happen in this century.
Oh, wow.
It was not in this millennium.
1800.
It was before Christ was born.
Oh, wow.
You're going to say, come on, Mansur, what are you talking about? Okay, I'm trusting that someone in here may be able to go back to the biblical history and give me the first occasion of identity theft for a $25 gift card.
I know it.
There was a young boy who stole his brother's birthright, and he colluded with his mother. Now Esau was the hairy brother who was red of skin, and he was good at fixing porridge, and he took the porridge into his dad to say, give me my birthrights. But unfortunately, mother knew that that was about to occur, and so mother put sheepskin on on Jacob, And Jacob went in before Esau got there, and his father gave him the blessing, which means he got a double portion of an inheritance. Okay? And so in exchange for that porridge, he got his brother to convince him to give him his birthright. And his mother colluded with him to commit identity theft so that the father would give him a double birthright portion, and the father did not want to do that. And that's found in the book of Genesis chapter 27. So who would like to have the card? Let me give it to you.
All right, thanks.
Now the second occasion of identity theft, who wants to guess when it took place? 11 chapters later in the book of Genesis, chapter 37. Now I won't tell you that one. Write it down on your piece of paper. And Deidre, I'm going to give this card to you. And I just committed identity theft there. Oh, it wasn't identity theft. I committed fraud there. You see, your card is actually worth something, and yours is worthless. You see, many times fraud appears to be totally legitimate, and it begins with something legitimate between you and me. And everybody else goes, oh, I'd like to have some of that too. And when it comes down to the next layer, it becomes fraudulent. You know, we let our guards down, don't we? You know, as I came into this building, you left your office. And when you left your office, I slipped a thumb drive into your computer. It's called a keylogger. And so when you go in and you're buying something over the internet with your credit card, I know every key that you're stroking. And I am now creating a duplicate of that, and I'm going to leave and commit fraud against you. Do you see her eyes going, you gotta be kidding me? Guys, it is that easy to do. And so when fraud happens many times with big merchants, it is because we become socially engineered, is the word for me becoming a little friendly with you. You met me at the door, we said hello, you offered me cookies, you offered me drinks and what have you. I said, how are you doing? And then I slipped into your office and I put a little thumb drive in there. Go check it out. Okay? Just to illustrate how we have to protect our businesses. So in your business, you're collecting a lot of data about individuals that is very personal and sensitive and private. If that gets compromised, what happens to the brand that Bert has built in the last 20 plus years, because he's been here ever since I've been here? Mm-hmm. What happens at Pruitt, Ford, Lipscomb, the dealerships, with all the financial data that you've collected, if in fact somebody keystrokes in there and they capture that information and it gets spread out all over everywhere? Oh, has anyone heard of Target's fraud? Anybody heard of
Hit me.
home? They hit you.
They got me.
Who else got hit by Target? Okay.
Mine was in China.
Yeah, in China. Yeah, I wasn't over there when that happened, but you know, did you have to pay for it?
No.
But did you have to go through HELL to get everything fixed up and what have you?
No.
Oh, good for you.
I have a great baby.
All right, good deal. Did you have any hassles? Did you have to? Did your card get stopped? Did you have to be told, sorry, your card's no longer going to work? I got to send you a new card.
Yes, and it took about 10 days before I did.
And that didn't bother you at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, whenever it happened, at least I wasn't out of town. But if you're out of town...
Oh, let me tell you the story of the guy that was out of town. And we stopped his card because we strongly believed fraud was going to happen on his card. Because of what Target told us, the guy used Target all the time, we're going, they definitely picked up his card. And so we put a freeze on his card to stop the fraud. The only problem was he was in New York trying to get into a hotel, and he's calling and screaming at us going, I can't get into the hotel, the card doesn't work. So you know what we did? We activated the card again, because all we got to do is go into our computers, type in a few numbers, card number, a bunch of identity information, turns it back on, he's good to go. Please use it very quickly, because in 3 hours I'm going to turn it off again. He goes, that's a real pain in the tail. And I says, well, no, it's really not a pain in the tail, it's a pain in your phone. Because guess what Texoma Community Credit Union has come out with, and so have many other financial institutions. You now, my phone's turned off, can tap an icon, pull up your credit card, and you can hot status your card so that it works because you're fixing to go to lunch. And as soon as you're through with lunch, you can tap it again and you can turn it off. You see, the fraud that's committed is merely a collection of the information that happens when the merchant processes all their work at the end of the day and they send it over the communication lines and it gets stolen. Somebody hacks into it. I'm not going to go into the ways in which it can be hacked into. Just trust me, it gets hacked. Now, the person that hacks the card does not actually commit the fraud. He sells mega files, hundreds, thousands, possibly even millions of files, to a intermediary, a second party. They then take the cards and they figure out which ones are good and which ones are bad, and then they sell that data to a third entity who actually creates the cards that they go and use. Now let me tell you something about the cards. I forgot to bring one. Does anybody happen to have a gift card on you? Yeah. Just a regular gift card? Yeah. By the way, while you're there, do you happen to have a $10 bill?
No.
20?
No cash.
No cash. Jeez, you're a smart guy.
Sorry.
You see this card right here that says it's good for 30 bucks? Is it a MasterCard or a Visa card?
Neither.
Neither. But the hackers take a card like this and they take the mag stripe on the back and they implant the data that is on the back of, give me your legitimate credit card, because this is the one I just gave you, and it is valid for 25 bucks, so go have steak dinner on our pleasure. They take the data that's on the back of here, if this was a personalized card. Now this is a gift card with a master brand on it, so you can go to whatever restaurant. I didn't want you to eat my favorite restaurant, but rather your favorite restaurant. And they embed that information on the back of this card. So now when the individual goes up to the merchant and he swipes the card, he's swiping this card that's got all the correct information on it. Now how do you stop that? It's very simple. If you've ever gone to Lowe's, and Lowe's had this in place long before Home Depot had its $90 million 90 million accounts that were compromised. When you go into Lowe's, do you notice they always say, what's the last 4 digits of the card? What's the last 4 digits on this card? There are none, because the last 4 are on this card. You with me? Mm-hmm. That is a fraud prevention mechanism. And you should applaud any merchant who says, I want to see the card and I want the last 4 digits. They are trying to protect your identity. Now then, when identity theft happened, how much did you have to pay for the fraud that occurred?
I didn't.
Yeah. And has anybody else ever had to report fraud? Cosme? How much did you have to pay? Yeah. Did you know that you are liable for the first $50 of fraud that happens on every transaction? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You legally are liable for that according to the law. But we financial institutions don't want to charge you for that because you'll get mad at us and go to use somebody else's card and we'd lose out. So we waive that $50. So I got to tell you my second story. Sally Sue, fictitious name, comes to the credit union and she complains that her card has been compromised and identity theft has happened and transactions have happened on her card that are not authorized. So we begin just the regular, what went on? I mean, that's the reason I like the job that y'all do, because y'all ask those kinds of questions. And after all the questions were asked, I'm going, okay, so let me make sure I understand this. You didn't do the transactions, but as I'm looking in your account, some transactions did occur at that place of business. Actually, it was not iTunes. If you bought games, Game Boys and things like that over the internet, what might be some of those websites? Because I don't know the names of them.
PlayStation or
Xbox, okay, there you go. You get the concept. And I says, so these were authorized, but these are not authorized? Well, yeah, these I told my son that he could purchase those items. But these over here, I didn't tell him he could purchase. He went into my purse, got my card, and he went on to the internet and he made all these transactions. And I want you, Texoma Credit Union, to pay me back for all those transactions that occurred. And I says, could you bring your son in here? I'll arrange to have the police here. And we will arrest your son for the fraud that he's committed against you. And every one of those transactions you want me to dispute, it's going to cost me, what? Some money. It costs me $35 every time a dispute happens. So I need you to pay me for $50 per transaction and bring your son in here. Oh, how old is your son, by the way? Oh, he's 8 years old. I says, man, you've got to be kidding me. I am not the parent. You are the parent. Go do your job. But you see, identity theft is not always identity theft. Frequently, it is family fraud. Let me give you the next illustration of that. This is years ago. Mary Sue, fictitious name, comes to me asking me to reimburse her $200. I says, Mary Sue, tell me the story. And she did, which was I gave the card to my boyfriend, and he with my brother went down to the United, and they got the groceries I asked them to get, and they brought me $100 cash. Now when she said they brought me $100 cash, that tells me that she used the PIN to do the transaction, right?
Yes.
So she was giving her groceries, she was giving her $100, they put it on top of her dresser, they put the credit card on top of the dresser, and she goes to sleep. She wakes up the next morning, and the $100 is gone, the credit card is still there. She looks in her account, and she sees the transaction from the night before midnight occurred. And then she saw a $200 withdrawal from her account at about 2 a.m. And I said, well, how do you think that happened? So I'm sure my boyfriend went to an ATM and got the $200. And I want you, Wayne Mansur, to pay me for the fraud that happened. And I says, wait a second, what did I do wrong here? That's your responsibility. You have an obligation to protect the card and the information that's on the card. Did you change the PIN? I knew she didn't. Did you change the PIN after you gave the card to them? No. Did you call us and tell us the status of the card is hot, wild, lost or stolen so that it couldn't be used? No. Then why should I pay you for that? And I says, and let me ask you the next question. The $100 was gone too. Do I owe you the $100? Do I owe you $100 in addition to the $200 because he took your $100 cash? No. You couldn't have prevented that. I said, how could I prevent the other? The point I wish to make with these three stories is that oftentimes fraud is not fraud. It's just bad acting friends and family. And bad acting friends and family does not constitute fraud, and that's not why you're here today, although social engineering is not much different than family friend fraud. And if you get a rogue employee, I won't call the name, but there is a local car dealership in the area who had an employee who was making copies of the financial transactions, the loan applications for loans, and sending that information out to other people, and they were using it to go out and apply for credit cards because when they get a loan application, they don't protect sometimes, I don't either, I don't always protect as much as I should the credit card information. But they would go out and they would apply for fictitious credit cards because they had a rogue employee in their organization. And so that brings up the next point. Be sure that you let your employees know and demonstrate to them that you're checking for fraud. You're checking to make sure that things are being held and done properly. And put into your, this makes no sense to me at all, but put into your personnel policies that if you commit fraud against this organization, you are subject to be fired from your employment and we will prosecute you to the full extent of the law. Because here's why. If you don't have that in your policies, do you realize that there is no policy that says that they cannot commit fraud? I know. I had the same response when I was told that. You got to be kidding me. I have to have a policy that says
It's against the law?
it's against the law to do these things and I can fire you for that? But I have had to fight that fight. I don't exaggerate my stories, guys. The real stories are just better than making them up. I had an employee who, I gave her a promotion, and she was poor about coming to work on time. Especially on Saturdays. We have our lobby open Saturday morning. And she came to work Saturday morning in her pajamas. And when I saw her in her pajamas, I'm scratching my head going, you know, we sure are getting casual in the attire that we are wearing. And when I get closer, I'm looking at the cameras, when I get closer I'm going, wow, she is in her pajamas. So when I disciplined her and ultimately fired her, because she later on had other infractions, and when I went to the Texas Workforce Commission and said, I'm firing her because of inappropriate attire, wearing her pajamas, and etc., and they said, do you have a policy that says she cannot wear her pajamas to work? Or that she has a standard of clothing that she has to wear. And at that time I did not. I didn't have a policy that says you have to come dressed professionally and give them illustrations of that kind of thing. And you know what? We won, but we didn't have the best case because we didn't have the policy there. How does that relate to fraud? Make sure you have a policy that addresses fraud, and if fraud happens within your organization that an employee commits, that is grounds for termination of employment. Okay? Sidebar for a moment. Still talking fraud. The tips that are written on the back of this card are brilliant. Commit them to heart. The inside of the card does have aluminum foil in it. No, I can't walk by you and take your identity stuff. In fact, I have a fob, and that is the key to every door at Texoma Community Credit Union. In fact, in places that I'm the only person that can access it. Well, that's not really true, because the lady who programs this key could fraudulently make another key. But I got to tell you, if I had to tap this, I can't activate it here. I cannot activate it here. You have to actually touch it to the other item. Some people are saying, and I hear this commercial on XM radio, you've got to buy our special sleeves, or you got to buy our special billfolds, because they've got stuff in there that will prevent that card from being stolen when somebody walks past you. Fear-mongering was the word that you used. Sales by fear-mongering. It's not that sensitive. I have used the EMV card in Canada, and it has to be a very cognizant, a very well-known that we're attaching the card to that, so that's a great card. As I stood back here and looked in the rack, it's got numbers to know and places to go, the FTC and other places that you go to address fraud. Guys, these are great resources that your bureau provides to you at no cost to you, and it would be great for you to have these pieces of information at your workplace to hold a staff meeting with just your employees, because if you will educate just your employees, they will tell somebody else who will tell somebody else, and we'll get the word out. You know the number one way to eliminate fraud? One word: education. I can put all kinds of technologies on my door. I can do all kinds of things with my card sleeves and what have you. But if I have education, I will be able to do far more than one single transaction that I can do. Here's another one, Fighting Fraud 101. Great little brochure. Here's another one. I love this one. It is FTC prize offers you don't have to pay. How many of you have not received in the mail a letter that says you have won $100,000, $200,000, or $70,000, pull the number out of the sky, and all you have to do is pay the taxes on this or send us some money. Now, we have sent you a check for that amount of money, and all you have to do is cash that check that we've sent to you in advance on your prize earnings, and then Western Union that information to us, and when we get it over here, then we'll send you the big prize. Who has not got one of those in the mail? We keep a notebook of all the fraud that we get to see and hear about at Texoma Credit Union. It was so funny. I laughed out loud when a lady came to us and she had a check for, I don't remember how much it was, $3,500 or something like this. These are counterfeit currencies that we keep. By the way, I loved it when an employee of mine had been on the job for 4 days. An individual came in with a stack of counterfeit $20 bills, and she said, "Excuse me just a moment, I'll be right back." "Mr. Mansur, these don't look too good. The ink's rubbing off of them." I'm like, yeah, they're counterfeit. Well, let's get the police department out here before we let the individual go. So we said, if you wait just a second, we need to take care of something else. And the individual innocently had the $20 bills. And in fact, the ink was coming off in part because it was counterfeit, but some other things caused it to happen. And when I asked her, how did you know it was counterfeit? You know what her answer was? Because I know what the real deal looks like, and this doesn't look like a real $20 bill. So how can you identify fraud? By having good knowledge base. Back to the letter. The letter says, here's your check for the dollar amount. Came into the teller line, station number 1, let's say. Literally, at station number 3 was another individual cashing a check for the exact same amount of money, the exact same check number. When we looked at the 2 letters, both letters said the exact same thing. In fact, it says check number, it's used the same check number, and your prize award number is the same number as the other person's award number. And I've got them in the book. Those letters are still here, and they were identical. We told the one lady, this is fraudulent, you don't want to mess with it. She says, okay, and she was ready to leave. The second individual says, no, I think it's authentic. I want you to give me the money. Now, at the time, we did not have a policy that says we're going to charge you a fee for processing fraudulent transactions. But we do have an obligation to process a transaction that somebody orders us, demands us to process for them. But can you imagine the time, the energy, the resources, the expenses that are created by that processing? And so instantly I thought, yes ma'am, I'll process that for you, but it'll cost you $50 if it comes back fraudulent. $50, that's not fair. And I said, ma'am, look at the expenses, look at the time, look at all that's going to go on. I said, I know this is going, well, I'll process it anyhow. Okay, we processed it. Did it come back fraudulent? Yeah. What she was, and by the way, we did not release the proceeds. We put a freeze on the proceeds for 999 days. Now you're saying, well, that's too long. That's 3 years almost. Yeah. I know it's fraudulent. When you send a check out of the United States banking system, it takes longer to clear going through a Canadian bank than it takes to clear through a USA bank. Does that make sense, kind of just intuitively? And so you have to allow for those extra days. And when the check came back fraudulent, we were able to go into the lady's account and recover the funds. If you'd like to thumb through this, you're welcome to it. There, in fact, is a fraudulent check in here. You're a member of Texoma Credit Union. Doesn't that look like the Texoma Community Credit Union check? Yeah, that is an exact copy of the Texoma Community Credit Union check. But that is a fraudulent check because Gary Hamner is not a member of the employees of the Texoma Community Credit Union. So simply a forged signature makes fraud. There are lots of checks in here, and every one of these checks was a check sent to a consumer saying this is a legitimate, valid cashier's check. And a cashier's check used to be considered to be just as good as cash. Do you hear the word in cashier's check? What's the first word that you hear? Cash. Now, let me tell you where cashier's checks came from. Let me tell you how they were used. Let me tell you what we think about them now. Cashier's checks came about because a man was trying to sell a vase. A vase is nothing more than an expensive vase. And he was selling this vase for $1 million. And so he finds the buyer, and the buyer says, yes, I'll buy that for $1 million. The buyer does not want to carry $1 million of cash with him, right? So he goes to his bank and he says, I need something that will be as good as cash. You cannot put a stop payment on it. You cannot void it. It has to pay no matter what happens. He says, okay, we're going to give you a check. And we're going to say that it's a cash check. It's a cashier's check. He took the check, gave it to the guy from whom he bought the vase. They exchanged. Is the check going to cash regardless? Yes. Was the vase legitimate? No, it wasn't. But it was too late. They'd already exchanged the transaction. Buyer beware. He then goes to the bank trying to put a stop on his check. Can't do that. He was told go get a bond from an insurance company, and the bond was going to cost him $100,000. In other words, I, the insurance company, don't want to bond this transaction, don't want to insure this transaction, because I really think it's going to be fraudulent. And we, the insurance company, will end up having to pay out $1 million. Couldn't get a bond for that. He ended up losing the money. So a cashier check became a way in which, when we buy and sell cars, sometimes we'll ask for a cashier's check. And we made our minds think that this is absolutely great. It will never be stopped the payment of. And yet people then started putting cashier's checks on the top of checks that they knew were fraudulent checks. They knew there was no money standing in the financial institution to back up the transaction. So we were cashing those checks just left and right. Back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, we were cashing those checks just left and right. Now we have found out the #1 telltale sign of a fraudulent check is, it says on the top, cashier's check. Oh, that wrecked with the minds of the title companies who have to have cash to buy that $200,000 house. So now we have a system whereby we can contact them and they can contact us directly to find out, is that cashier's check, in fact, a valid cashier's check? So what does that mean to you? If you take checks for whatever reason, and if it says cashier's check, buyer beware. Make sure that it is what it purports to be. Take time to call and to find out, is this in fact a check issued by your financial institution in this dollar amount? A cashier's check. And they'll give you that information. Now, I've got to tell you, Mona, right? Mona, there is one of these in here, and I don't know which one. I could find it if I took time to, where it's a cashier's check, fraudulently issued by a credit union, if I remember correctly, in Colorado. And when I dialed the phone number to call my fellow credit union president in Colorado, and I'm starting to listen to the voicemail greeting, and I'm starting to listen to the telephone prompts, and finally somebody comes on the phone, and I just asked them a really simple, odd question. What color are the checks that y'all issue? Because I'll tell you, what's the color of the check that we issue at Texoma Community Credit Union? Yes, it's a maroon color. You know, you pick them up all the time. So if you got one that was green that said cashier's check, you're gonna go, that's not Texoma, I don't think, unless they change the colors of their checks. You see, branding, how we present ourselves in a community, is exceedingly critical, especially to a financial institution. I said, these prompts don't sound right. I asked the lady a couple of other questions, and I determined the check was fraudulent. I then sent the FBI to where they allegedly were. They weren't there. They simply had a telephone line that went from Canada to that location, from that location, then it reached out to the rest of the world, and when somebody called, it just went through those call forwarding processes. So just because you call and you are told it's a valid check, buyer beware, just be on the alert. Mona, you see anything in there kind of gives you a little bit of a intrigue? Any questions? Any? What?
Jeez.
Yeah.
They look real.
Yeah, they look real. Yeah, they look as good as can be. There are many times not. Money orders. Oh, money orders are always good, aren't they? I took postal money orders from a lady. She has her boyfriend. He's overseas, but he cannot cash his paychecks. They had this romantic relationship for 4 or 5 months. He then started sending her his checks to cash. She cashed the checks, and she sent him money orders. It was all fraudulent. She ended up losing about $4,000. I had one lady who gave away, through fraudulent internet connections, contacts, boyfriends, and this lady was 70 plus years of age. Husband of 40, 50 years had just deceased. She was lonely, she was sad, she wanted to be happy again. And so this man promised her everything in the world. Could you send me a little bit of money? She plowed through $200,000 of her money on deposit. And finally, there was still a few $1,000s left from his life insurance policy. I was a bully, guys. I'm sorry to Better Business Bureau folks, but I was a bully. And I says, I'm not going to allow you to do any more checks out of here that go over there. I'm not going to let you do any wire transfers. I'm not going to let you do this. I'm not going to let you do that. Now, to be real truthful, I don't have the authority to prevent that from happening, but I just felt so badly for that lady. And I stopped her. I thought I did. She found one more way to get her money and to send it over there, and she sent the last $20,000 over, and then finally he sent her a check for $15,000. She deposited the check, sent him the cash for the check. I don't know why and how my employees missed it, but they did. She now has a loan with us for $10,000 and is paying $300 a month, as long as she lives, probably, from her Social Security check to pay us back for she had $5,000. She was left with a $10,000 balance that she owed us, and we had to pay it out to somebody else. Identity theft, fraud. Guys, it is an expensive ordeal. So let's go to another question on here. Predominantly, when credit card fraud happens, who pays for it? Mona, who do you think pays for all of that?
Thanks.
You're right. The banks pay for it. Do the consumers pay for it?
In some form or fashion.
Well, you're exactly right, Cosme. The consumer does not pay for it up front, But the consumer does pay for it because we spread that cost amongst all of our customers in the fact that we have to charge a fee. For example, if you have to replace a credit card, even Texoma Credit Union says, we'll charge you a $5 fee. Now, I bet you none of y'all have ever paid a $5 fee, because the only time we charge it is when we strongly believe that the consumer is just being reckless and careless. But if it's a legitimate loss of the card, we don't care about the money. But it does cost us about $5.69 to create a new piece of plastic. So when Target lost financial data for millions of people, and Home Depot for millions of people, and financial institutions had to replace that, did the merchants pay the financial institutions for all the expense they incurred? They did not. Did the consumers directly out of their own pockets, other than spreading it across the entire customer base, did the individual consumers pay for the fraud that happened? No, they did not. So now, if you look into your packets, if you'll go to the first page, you're going to find some details about credit unions and Home Depot. And Home Depot is still not a settled matter, but if you go to the next page, I think it is, yes. And as you go deeper into that, I'm not sure exactly which page it is on, we're going to find that Target has finally paid out to consumers $10 million. They paid out $10 million for their fraud. And they're in the process of settling with financial institutions for an additional $19 million. So we're talking roughly $30 million. Here's the question that kind of puzzles me. It's another question on your front page. So why don't the merchants protect the data? Why aren't they better? We financial institutions have not been breached. We've not caused a loss of your personal private information, because if we did, we'd have to pay gazillions of dollars, and it would be very expensive to us. So why do the merchants not protect that data?
I would have thought that they would have had some sort of insurance company or a company that was supposed to be safeguarding all of their customers' database.
The processor is supposed to protect that data, but many times they do not.
Okay, but in that case, I would think that they would be liable for all.
You would think they would, wouldn't you? But the reason they don't protect the financial data is because there's no law that says you have to protect the financial data. There is no law that says Target, Home Depot, Office Max. Guys, there are literally tens of thousands of fraud data breaches that occur in our society. And tens of millions of people's financial data is compromised. The merchant has no legal financial obligation for replacing that or stopping it. So, as you go into your packet, I think it's the last page, you're going to find that there's a piece of legislation that has now become crafted and drafted that's going to work its way through the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. Hopefully, President Obama would sign that piece of legislation that basically says, merchants, you have to protect the financial data. Yeah, you would think that would be common sense. But who's pushing against that data being, or excuse me, that legislation being approved to protect that data?
Customers.
No, not the customers. Who?
Processors.
The processors are. Take a look at the, oh wait a minute, I don't know if you have this one or you do not. Target MasterCard agrees to $19 million settlement for failure to protect consumers' financial information. I've highlighted this on my own. Target and Home Depot breaches have cost credit unions and their members at least $90 million. Now, if I didn't personally have 90 million, all of us combined had 90 million. I had about $10,000 of losses. And simply when we get ready to figure our fees, we're going to have to change our fees in order to recover that. We got to get the money from somewhere to pay for that wasted expense. Credit unions reissued roughly $4.6 million cards at a cost of $5.68 per card that we replaced. Here is where a class action lawsuit is being brought against Home Depot. Oh, here's the one I'm looking for. The Senate introduces tough data security bill. It is, and what it does is sets the standards for how merchants must handle consumers' personal financial information. It's called the Data Security Act of 2015. If you're interested in knowing more about that piece of legislation, I'm happy to provide that one to you. So predominantly, who creates the fraud? It's not the family fraud. That's pretty small. It's probably not even the fraud that's going to happen at your little shop, nor your slightly bigger, but still little shop. They are going after large entities who have the money to protect the data. The reason they don't protect the data is because it costs them less money to pay out $30 million, costs them less money in brand identity deterioration than it would cost them to fix the data security. And there's no law that says they have to fix it. And so now they are pushing against a Texas piece of legislation as well as a United States Congress piece of legislation that requires the merchants to protect your financial data. Why would they push against it? Because if they become liable for what they are doing, then they're going to have to change their behaviors. Now, show of hands. How many of you want your financial data protected, even if the merchant's got to go out and spend a few dollars to make it happen? Yeah, we all do. Why do the merchants not want to go do it? Because it means they have to invest in their infrastructure and they have to protect, improve what's going on. Does anybody have a checkbook with you? Not a person in this room has a. Do you even know what a checkbook is? And the reason I ask that is we now have a new generation of children who don't even know what a checkbook is. In fact, we had we call them YPs, young professionals, came to us and says, why do I need a checking account? I need a card account. I said, a card account? Yeah, you give me a card, I put money into the account, I take money out of the account with the card, and I'm going, that's called a checking account. No, 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 I don't want those pieces of paper you have to write. I'm serious, guys, that's where we are, it's the new generation. Do you have a checkbook?
Yes, that was it.
But you got the paper? Mm-hmm. Wow, cool. You know how to write a check?
Yes.
I'm not being insulting with this. Have you ever written a check at a merchant?
Yes.
Have you? And what did they do when they took that payment instrument? A piece of paper is nothing more than a payment instrument, just like a credit card is a payment instrument. What did they do with that payment instrument?
They have a machine that they put it into.
Did they ask for anything before they put it into that machine, like maybe a driver's license or some identification? Or
Probably a driver's license.
They did. Why do you think they asked you for a driver's license when you gave them a piece of paper that was actually a worthless piece of paper, nothing more than a piece of paper, but it's a voucher that says to your financial institution, this is my demand that you pay to this merchant $200. Why would they take time to write down your driver's license information, etc.?
To make sure that I am who I am.
That's a novel idea. We remember doing that all the time 20 years ago.
Right.
Now, when you take your credit card to the same merchant, in fact, I am first in line with my credit card, and my wife is second in line with checkbook, both written on the same demand account. And I say with my credit card, swipe it through, what investigation, what criteria did they go through to make sure it was valid? They might have asked for the zip code. They're now starting to do that, and that's good technology. You'll find if you pay at the pump, enter the zip code, because that reduces significantly the fraud that's happening. That zip code does not happen to be on the back of that mag stripe. Okay? Good point, Monica. They also might ask for your PIN. If you PIN it, by the way, look at the bonus question on the front page. There's a war between the merchant and the financial institution over whether or not you pay by PIN, debit, or you pay by signature, credit. Okay? Same card can go down as either a debit or a credit. You simply pin it to make it a debit transaction, and you sign it to make it a credit transaction. I'm going to come to that war in just a moment. I don't want to whet your appetite with why the merchants make that so difficult for you to find the credit transaction. Okay? Let's go on though. Let's see, who pays for it? Are we number 4? Number 5. Well, we're going faster than I thought. So what is it that you, the wise and thrifty consumer, can do to reduce the fraud that happens in your world as it would relate to this? As it would relate to businesses, what can you do to reduce the fraud?
Multiple steps.
Ask for identification.
Ask for identification, great point. Verify the information that's on the card. That 3-digit number on the back of the card is exclusive to this piece of plastic. It's not totally accurate, because you think about it, there's only 3 numbers there. There's millions of cards, so you couldn't get that many combinations out of there, but the likelihood of 2 of those getting mixed up is exceedingly small. Okay?
You're making me nervous waving your card around in front of the cameras.
Oh, you can have the card.
Okay. I was like,
I want to tell you, Mona, I'm going to tell you about that card. I'm not being braggadocious. And to the cameras, there's over $20,000 in that account, Mona. My PIN is a 2-digit number. It's either 01 or 1 and 2 or 2 and 0 or 3 and 0 or 3 and 1 or 9 and 6, and it's only 2 numbers, and I use those 2 numbers a total of 4 times to come up with my PIN. I'm going to write down what my PIN is. That's my PIN. If you guess that number, you can have the $23,000 in that account. Oh, by the way, you get 3 chances, because after 3 chances, the ATM is going to shut down and say, this person is either inebriated and does not remember what their number is, they're sound asleep, they're being forced at gunpoint in order to put that number in, or they've stolen the card and they don't even know what it is. Think about it. I, the financial institution, have to find a way that I can protect myself, and so I'm going to let you have an unlimited number of attempts. Now, you can keep punching the numbers, and they'll keep coming back saying wrong number. But after the strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, the card becomes deactivated. 3 numbers, get a chance.
3 or 4?
4 numbers, I'm sorry. All 4 of y'all can get together. You can split the pot if you want to. No, you cannot be involved in the transaction.
Covering it up.
As you said, it's 2 numbers.
2 numbers used multiple times
For a total of 4 numbers.
for a total of 4 numbers.
63.
6222.
Yeah.
6226.
Wrong.
I was gonna go with 63. 63, 63, 63, 36.
2 wrong. Give me another one.
What's the middle person? 37, 37.
Okay.
So,
37, 37, wrong, strike 3, you're out, the computer shuts it down. Okay? My money's now safe. Now, I'm going to allow you to tell them the 2 numbers that are used.
1,
But you only get $10 out of my account if you get this one correct. What are the numbers that are used?
1 and 0.
Only a 1 and a 0. How many multiple factors are there of a 1 and a 0? It could be 0, 0, 0, 1, or it could be 1, 0, 0, 0, or it could be 1, 1, 1, 0, or it could be, do you see all the combinations? So now you've got a great advantage. Do you understand why when somebody comes into my shop and says, somebody stole my PIN and they used my card, and I take my card out of my wallet and I go through the story I just went through with you, and I says, and you can have all the money in my card right now. And when I get through with this illustration, they're going, I gave the PIN number to my girlfriend, and she used it with my authorization, and she gave me the card back. And by the way, the first story I told you about the man that paid for his sexual favors but decided he didn't like that. By the way, I've already have to respond to the Texas Credit Union Department because he filed his complaint with them, but do you think he told the whole story or just the part of the story that made his case? Cosby, when you have people come in, you want to believe the first person, but then the second person starts talking and you're going, okay, now wait a second, why didn't the first person tell me all the facts that the second person is now disclosing that really are relevant to all of this? Consumers will do strange things. Consumers will do strange things. You as a merchant must protect and set up programs and processes whereby you are protecting yourself from that. What time do I have? Because I have no recognition of time at this point.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. We have wrapped up, but I'm going to ask, first of all, we can leave now, but I have one more point to make, and that's my bonus point. How many of you want to hear the bonus point? Bonus point.
Zero.
The bonus question is, pay by credit, pay by debit. There's a war that's going on between the merchants. In fact, Angie Olmstead, my administrative assistant, if it was not for Angie, I would be a mess. She keeps me in the right place at the right time with the right tools going on. And she helped me put this package together for today, finishing up printing. And she says, Wayne, I got a story that I want you to tell for me. Great, Angie. What's the story? I was at Whole Foods, and when I swiped my card through, it says, please press credit to keep our costs down. And it's true. The merchant wants you to use credit, because when the credit transaction is demanded, the merchant pays a lower transaction fee, I'll explain that in a moment, than if the debit PIN is used. By the way, I'm sorry, I said that he wants you to press the credit. He does not. Let me clarify that. He does not want you to press credit. He wants you to press debit, and he wants you to use PIN. And that's why when you walk into Walmart, it's so hard to get to the signature, the credit side of it. You have to press cancel, which is kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Why would I press cancel if I want to pay you, but I just want to sign? Well, the reason is, if you think about all the transactions that MasterCard does, for which they pay a transaction fee, it's a lot of money if they could convince everybody to go only to the PIN-based side of the transactions. Now, with that having been said, we, the financial institutions, want you to do what? Sign the transaction. By the way, there are laws that are provided to you under a signed document, a signed transaction, that are not present to protect you under a PIN-based transaction. The merchant's concerned for whom? Him and his profits, or the consumer, or the financial institution? A, B, or C?
Profits.
Yeah, concerned with themselves. They're not concerned about the consumers. I mean, the consumer needs to figure out what's smartest to do.
I have a question.
Sure, shoot.
Okay, because I was under the assumption that if you do debit, then they get their money faster. If you do credit, then it takes 2 or 3 days like a regular credit card transaction.
No, it makes no difference, because they both sit in the queue that go down think of a telephone line, but not a
Right.
telephone line. It goes to a switch, the switch sends it over to the financial institution says, yes, the money's there, comes back here, they have their money. Literally in
So it doesn't
moments.
matter
Does not matter to them.
to the place that you swipe your
The
card.
merchant does not matter in terms of their treasury, money, cash that they get. Their treasury is funded at the same speed regardless of which telecommunication, debit or credit. Does not matter. Here's all that does matter. And if you think about it, it's what matters to you too. It's a function of money. You see, a transaction fee is the fee that the merchant pays to the financial institution to conduct that piece of business for them. Okay? So do you think that we financial institutions can issue out all these payment instruments, debit cards, credit cards, or even checks, and not charge something? I mean, somebody's got to pay Wayne's fat cat salary, okay? Somebody's got to pay for my Taj Mahal building. Somebody's got to pay for all the things that go on in the business, right? And debit cards, credit cards, checks, payment instruments, they cause an expense. There's an agreement that occurs between the financial institution and the merchant that says, we're going to pay you this much for it. And about 2 or 3 years ago, a piece of legislation came about where merchants said the amount of money that financial institutions are charging us, the merchants, to do these transactions is too high. And so that got cut from approximately 43 cents per transaction. So every time you do this, financial institution gets 43 cents on average. What if they're doing a $500 transaction? The financial institution is getting about 10 bucks. And you're going, well, that's not right. Why should the credit union, financial institution charge 10 bucks to do the transaction? Well, let's think this through. You remember that check that you were writing a few moments ago? Have you ever heard of a hot check, a bouncing check? So I'm the merchant, and I give you a $500 commodity, TV. And I copy down all your credit, your information on the back of your check. And the check is hot, it bounces, and I try to find you, and I never can find you. How much money did the merchant lose? $500, plus his labor, plus his legal expenses, plus his, and the list goes on and on and on. On the other hand, Kenny, that transaction is done by a credit card or a debit card. It goes out to the telecommunications lines. Financial institution says, I guarantee you, I promise you that I'll pay you that money. And it's guaranteed there's no way that I, the financial institution, can cancel that transaction. What's your cost? Zero. What did you replace? You paid a transaction fee about, on average, 43 cents per transaction in order to eliminate the potential fraud of a bouncing check. So is it worth it to you to pay that? But I want to tell you, my son is in a business where he takes credit card transactions, and do you know where his fraud occurs? Is it with the credit cards that happen, or is it with the bouncing checks that he has his problems? It's the bouncing checks. And he didn't like paying the financial institution a fee, a transaction fee. I said, Sean, the transaction fee on average is $3.10. How many $3.10 can you spend before you equal $395, which is the cost of one of his commodities that he rents? And the answer is 100. I said, Sean, is it cheaper to pay the few dollars here knowing your money's good, or you want to take the risk? Or he said, Dad, I'll pay the transaction fee. But you see, the merchants know that they get you to use the PIN-based, they get more money. The financial institution, thus the war occurs, wants you to use a signature-based because we get more money. Now, I'm going to play this out. I'm going to share with you this secret sauce, and then I'm through unless you have questions. You've seen Texoma Community Credit Union's Cashback Check, where if you use our checking account, we actually pay you money to have your checking account with us. Have any of y'all seen that? Okay? How are we able to pay you money for you to use your credit card to do transactions? Because the merchants pay me a transaction fee, and I'm simply sharing with you those transaction fees. Now you could ask the question, so why don't all the other financial institutions do that? Because they got a different philosophy than I've got. I've got a philosophy that if I share with many, I will have more. They have a philosophy, if I keep more, I don't have to go out and talk to many. And it's just a different philosophy of how to run a business. Okay? Cosby, Monica, thank y'all for inviting me. I've enjoyed it. I do have fun doing these things. I hope y'all pick up on that. I get a little excited about it when I'm presenting. I enjoyed visiting with you. By the way, there's not a thumb drive in your machine.
Unless you're going to check.
But you were worried, weren't you?
Yes.
But you should be worried, and your boss should say, you know what, we need to make sure that these thumb drives, that we check these from time to time, make sure there's not a keylogger in there. So that's the thing that you can do to protect yourself.
Where would that be inserted?
USB.
The
USB,
port.
yeah.
It's just gonna look like a flash drive.
Yeah. Flash drive.
In answer to your second question, is Abraham and Sarah?
No. No. The second identity theft, it's in Genesis chapter 37. Judah and Tamar. Judah was the father. Tamar was the daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law's husband had died. Tamar's wife was, Judah's wife was dead. Judah was going to church, shrine, and on his route to the shrine, he saw what is called a shrine prostitute, a lady who would be at the shrine, and she performed the act of prostitution for a fee. And she covered herself up so that and she did not have any children, and it was an embarrassment if you don't have children, and so she would do anything she could in order to get a child. And so she convinced him to, he asked for, he solicited sexual relations with her. She consented to that. 4 months later, as she's beginning to show her pregnancy, the village says, well, who's the father of your child? And she says, well, when I was having sex with this individual, they could not pay me, so they gave me a staff, two other items, I can't remember what it was, something goes around your neck, I'm thinking it was, I don't remember the third item. And whoever owns these items is the father of my child. And so they took those items around. Judah saw what it was, and Judah said, she is more righteous than I am. She committed identity theft by hiding her identity to convince him to do something he would not have done had he known the truth of what's going on. And you know, I guess that's kind of how fraud happens in our world. We think it's legitimate. We think it's a genuine deal, but it's not always the case. Oftentimes there's fraud. So you know what? 2 words. Buyer beware.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Presented to you.
Wow, thank you. I would enjoy that. I need a new coffee.
This program has been presented by the Better Business Bureau.